Hello, hello. What's up, Rishi?
Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Live from the moon, as per usual.
You guys got Starlink up there on the moon?
Not yet, but if you ask Elon, I'm sure he'll tell you in the next week or two.
Yes, moon-based city or whatever.
I was talking to Sam earlier, and we were wondering if you could write a neural net to take an Elon Musk prediction and spit out what the actual reality will be.
What do you mean? I mean, it seems like the reality is real stuff.
Because he's good at the if. I don't think the when he's very good at.
Yes, that's true. Elon's greatest gift is he stretches everyone's time horizons. I think, 20, 30, 40, 50 years out.
All right, shall we get started?
Let's get started. Another great day here in paradise, both on Earth and the moon. So what are we doing?
Today we have 10 projects from mostly Pioneer players, a couple Pioneer winners, and they've asked us a whole bunch of questions ranging from landing page feedback to how do I rebrand properly, to what is the best way for me to pitch my product? Larger variety of questions than usual today, which is good. It'll be fun.
That's great. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I am excited. I think you'll quite enjoy this group of projects today.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. It seems like first we have AI to write. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess we should do a quick screen share. Do you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good stuff. So here, obviously, we have our first project.
Yes, and this is from Ashwin, and he wants some quick landing page feedback, and then has a question that I think you will probably gravitate to naturally anyway, which is, should his focus be open source or enterprise?
Okay, let's first get a grasp of what this does. So what's interesting is, like a Shakespeare soliloquy, it seems like the opening tagline here kind of breaks in a bit too abruptly: to write docs for open source software, to die, to sleep, no more. So wonder if we could make this a little bit less Hamlet and a little bit more descriptive of what it does. Let's try to get a better grasp of what the company does, and then we'll get to the question. Basically, is it that it's going to look at your code and auto generate the docs? It also seems like you can pick from different AI models. That's interesting. Okay, it's some type of code document.
I think it's software that helps you, that makes easier the process of properly documenting. So AI is involved, it seems like, in helping you pick the right words, but it's not doing it for you automatically.
Yeah, I would imagine the pitch here is actually one of the most common forms of writing in any software business is kind of code documentation. And so is an AI assistant with a focus maybe on that market. Okay. I mean, there's a broader question, which is, well, we won't get to that. Let's aim to stay on time here. So what was the main question?
Should he focus on, right now he's focused on open source. Is that the right focus, or should he be focused on enterprise, on companies, helping companies document internally?
Well, Grammarly is the one everyone overlooked here in terms of it's a fairly successful business that just helps people write better. It started out basically as a spell check, and I guess it's valued at $1 billion. or more. I guess, in 2021 valuations is probably 10 billion. So they are across the board. I think their large market, if memory serves, is customer support and sales. The advantage of going after that market is it's very rich, and you can quantify revenue gain very clearly if you're helping customer support people write better or write more to the company's kind of vernacular. It's something every customer support lead is worried about, every CSX lead is worried about. In sales, obviously, if you can help people close, you can quantify it. The challenge with this market is super crowded. There's a lot of people doing various things there, including Grammarly itself. I like the focus on open source. I like the focus on a vertical. Wonder what would it be another interesting overlooked vertical? Like, for example, I mean, I don't know how big this market is, but is creative writing worth going after? I wonder, like screenwriting and book writing and playwriting. One issue you might have is none of these customers have money, but these customers end up making very celebrated pieces of art. So, it may be a good growth opportunity. The other interesting one to consider is project managers, maybe writing product specs or product docs, helping those people write better, I think would be super interesting. But picking a vertical, I think, makes sense. The one final exciting thing we can say about this is, like, I thought until 2018 or 2019, you had to really go after enterprise markets. There is seemingly this new in-between market that, like, Rome Research has really pioneered, that I guess Evernote was, the only company in the old era that had it as a product for, like, prosumers that I think could be into this. So people who are just really into writing and might pay you $4 a month for a Google Docs extension if you're able to prove that you're somehow dramatically better than Grammarly. So that would be my quick feedback there. What do you think, Rishi?
I have actually nothing more to add. That sounds great to me. We should move on to the next one.
Okay, this is cool. Unicornplatform.com. Anyway, eyes on the prize here.
Next up, we have Jonathan from Massachusetts building Pairagraph. And he's wondering when the right time to monetize is. And we also have a question after this. After this one, that's also monetization related.
Okay, so Pairagraph is a hub of discourse between notable individuals. Interesting. Basically, it's a kind of Quora with only blue check mark accounts. Reimagining the conservative legal movement. Oh, okay, and it's real debate club format. Okay. Kind of interesting, I think. And the question was how to charge or when to charge or who to charge?
When to charge.
Well, this is the type of website that could get very big if you were to try to make it free and you took the belief that you were going to charge for ads. That was the kind of Web 1.0 thinking, and Web 2.0, I should say. The Web 3.0 is, you start charging fairly early and you start charging your customers. So when to charge really depends on how you're going to charge. If you're going for ads, you should obviously do nothing now and try to build volume. If you're going to charge, if you're very excited about charging particular people, I actually think starting early could be interesting, and maybe we could just make up a rule or a proposal for a rule, which is if you're building a product in a market which traditionally makes money from ads, and you're going to try and make money not from ads, you may want to consider charging pretty early, just to prove that this actually has a chance to work without ads. One, by the way, interesting twist on this that's been on my mind lately is, let's imagine your plan was to charge access for the website. I mean, maybe it's kind of Substack style. You can try, in an attempt to build like hype for it, you can try getting like, 50 or 100 people in for free and then charging them. Meaning, I think in the consumer world, in the Substacky consumer world, prosumer world, maybe is the one we described earlier, I actually think you can try enterprise pricing mechanics where not everyone's paying the same amount up front, because you're really just trying to build a strong base. So my preference on a product like this would be to try and charge earlier rather than later, unless you're going for ads, of course.
Would agree with trying to do that earlier rather than later. I gotta say, this kind of seems to me like a version of Clubhouse that I would probably be more interested in, because if one of the things that people appreciate about Clubhouse is the sort of conversations between people, obviously there's an impromptu characteristic that you're not really capturing here, but it is like there's a lot of conversations on here that I'm clicking around that I find interesting. Obviously, I think any basketball fan has had the LeBron versus MJ debate, and there's one on here. If you go to the sports category, it's the only one that's on there is MJ versus LeBron, and you have a Bull sports writer in a debate with I don't know who this other guy is, but it is fun. This is like interesting, fun content. So I would be pro trying to monetize sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you went down this path with the benefit of maybe another minute or so of thinking, in my flea-sized brain about this thing, is certainly charging people and having 10% of the post be free, I guess, is the plan you'd come up with. I'd get rid of this donate thing. It's a sign of weakness, in my opinion. I mean, unless you're obviously a nonprofit. But if you're a for-profit business, you should just charge people for the goodness. And, ultimately, you're serving HTTP pages, and that costs money. But this is cool. Yeah, I agree. I would totally use this. You get to read here on VentServe. This is basically, it's long-form Twitter debates. It's neat. It's neat, and I suspect, by the way, one final thing on this, you probably will always be limited by a smaller TAM because you are asking people to read more than a paragraph of information. But you may have a kind of high intellectual assets under management, so to speak, meaning, you may only have at the end of the day 1 million users, but those are the million users that really matter in the world. So food for thought.
All right, next up we have RunHOA, which is software for homeowners. We're running homeowner associations.
HOA management done right.
So quick, just understand what it is, and then their question is also, they actually do have a pricing page set up, and they're not sure if they have the right pricing strategy.
Well, we get to actually try a demo here. That's neat. Okay, so I can see the unit. I can see what I have available. Anyway, this seems like rental management software, which is cool. I mean, obviously, an obvious market, a bunch of people operate in it. I think it's kind of funny to have an exclamation mark here. Maybe that's fine. That is certainly unique. I think having an Internet Explorer icon that leads you to Demo Valley is certainly unique.
So Ken, who's working on this, says that there are 350,000 HOAs in the U.S. Many of them pay around $10,000 to manage, I guess, annually to manage their associations. And if you go to their pricing page, they're priced at $399 annually, and says it is far more feature rich than whatever else is out there. So I think there's a pretty general version of this question, which is just how to make sure you're pricing right in enterprise sales.
Yeah, and he said his competitors are pricing at what?
So he says 10,000. Many of them pay around 10,000. I'm not really sure if the direct comp is 10,000 to 399. Then it's pretty clear. I don't know if it's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, let's make believe it is for a second. I assume things are a bit more complicated depending on the amount of properties you have and so forth. One interesting thing to note is I do think you can, look, at the end of the day, like, let's assume it's $10,000 versus $400. At the end of the day, the cost of running both services is the same. And so it's, on the one hand, you'd think, wow, really cool, we're drastically undercutting the market. On the other hand, you can undercut too much. And I do think if you make your product too cheap in a market where everything else is expensive, people begin to just wonder comparatively. They're just comparing apples, and one of them looks bruised. You know, avocados or bananas may have been a better metaphor, but you get the idea. So I would wonder if it's like $10,000. The right pricing page would be something like $8,000 with a red thing with a strike through, and wow, it's only $5,000. You know, first time discount, that type of thing. It is often the case that you hear from amazing hackers that they built something that's significantly more feature rich and it's cheaper and it's not getting adopted. And that's because the competency of the businesses that are doing the $10,000 a year thing, if this is indeed what they're doing, is not product competency, it's sales competency. And so this might be one of those things where you just have to go like really meet a lot of people and shove it down the sales channel in order to get it sold, and drastically dropping the price isn't enough. So that would be my quick take on pricing if it's really 10K. The other interesting thing you could consider with pricing is a reseller model. I mean, you probably know more about the HOA model than me, but is there a customer set that would become rich by selling your software to the end user? The stupid name for this is B to B to C. It wouldn't surprise me if there was in your world, and that might be another way to break in. There is something about this website that does look slightly amateurish that I think you could fix up pretty quickly. I'm trying to put a finger on it. I mean, I think this font is not correct. I don't think you want a serif font in your tagline. It looks a bit like a blog. And I would just get rid of this giant contact us thing at the bottom. It just looks like a consultancy. You have already the hero at the top. You should probably just have a sign up button again at the bottom. Anyway, that's my quick feedback. What do you think, Rishi? It's a nice neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't have Ken here, but it seems like the main, like, I don't know if this landing page is going to be the way that they get paying users anyway right now.
Fair.
Like if you go to the top, I think it says something like no credit card required for the first 30 days. Like I don't know if that's anywhere near mattering at this stage for actually closing an HOA.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to do, we obviously don't know, and we are not users of HOA software. The thing to do is call users of existing HOA software and ask them what sucks about it, and use that not necessarily to decide what to build, but at least to build a narrative, not to build the software, but to build the narrative of what you're going to counterposition and sell against. Quite possible none of them tell you it's too expensive. If they all tell you it's too expensive, then you can undercut. But they might tell you, well, the software is really sluggish. Well, now you should make a homepage that says it's the fastest move, it's the most responsive HOA software, and point people at that. So
next up we have an unusual question. I don't know if you'll actually want to. It's a bit text dense, but if you open up the link that's in there as well, this is just a different Bitly link. I don't actually have the name of this person. It just says the name is Nooble. He or she from the UAE has 2 pitches, is not really sure which one's most compelling. So you can take a glance, or we can kind of do a fun experiment, which is let's just look at the landing page and figure out how we would pitch this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whatever you think's more fun. Landing page. Okay, here's the landing page. Nooble. Listening made easy. Listen to the best content across a range of topics and languages in less than 3 minutes. News, interviews, how-to, reactions. Okay. So it seems like the cream of the crop of podcasts. It's what's that thing that does that for books that keeps on buying?
Yeah, I'm just looking it up right now.
Blinkist. Yes. Many CEOs from blah 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 use Blinkist.
Yeah.
You know when ads are working when people regurgitate it for you for free on their own platform. Okay, so I think it'd be, let's not argue about if this is a great idea. Let's just assume it is. Oh, and let's see if we can make a better landing page. Listening made easy. Like, what do you think, Rishi?
I think actually the argument is the Blinkist one. Like, there are a lot of people who give me a second. It is the Blinkist argument. It's basically, while you could claim that most people do actually want to listen to want to have that whole experience of listening to the long form hour-long podcast, you can say that about books too. And it turns out there's a big market for Blinkist. I actually don't know how successful they are, but given that we both know about it and it seems to be everywhere, I would assume they're at least somewhat successful. So it's a worthy experiment. Can Blinkist for podcasts be successful?
Yeah, I mean, we should just assume Blinkist is like successful enough. I don't know that they'll be like a strike, but it's fine. I wonder, the best. Why is it going bold?
Yeah, I mean, they've raised a Series C.
One question is like, what is to the extent to which, listening made easy, I think is like, when doing the homepage, you really want to think about the availability cascade you want to pump through the world, and you just want to focus on the thing that will resonate the most. I don't think the issue is that listening is hard with podcasts. I think maybe the issue that the Nooble is going to help is, at least anecdotally, is that the insights in a 3-hour podcast are spread out over obviously 3 hours, and you want to get them quickly. So I tend to be very interested in learning. You could say this doesn't resonate with all users, but to me, the concept of like getting smarter faster, to the extent that you want to have an aspirational pitch, we can talk about that in a minute. That is kind of more exciting. And maybe you could say something like, Nooble summarizes the best content for the best content.
A fun fact, Blinkist does podcasts now. They call them shortcasts.
Well, there you go.
That's interesting.
I wonder if you could also pitch this as instant replay for podcasts, because I assume they're going to like go through the podcast that came out this week and highlights. That's interesting. I mean, honestly, yeah. Podcast highlights.
Listening, yeah.
That's pretty deep.
I think one thing that Blinkist does well is it sells you, like a lot of products do, it sells you a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
Fit learning into your life. So we should move on, but I think listening made easy, which is what was there to start with. Listening made easy makes me feel like I'm lazy. But I can fit learning into my life. I'm a busy person. That seems more palatable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two pitches you could do on the homepage. One is, to your point, fit learning into your life, learn faster, listen faster, be smarter. There's a lot of interesting aspirational ideas. And to the extent that you wanted like just a homepage that just says what you do, I do think, podcast highlights is just a great way of quickly describing it.
Yep.
By the way, I mean, as we pull up the next one, I think this could be pretty exciting if it were to know the podcasts that I listen to, and this becomes like a table of content of podcasts. So, I'm getting ready to do a long drive, and maybe it just gives you 10 to 20 seconds of each of the podcasts you subscribe to. So you could just triangulate like an HBO program guide on what you want to listen to.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, if you could have like 5 very clickable categories or people, you click one of them and you're listening to a 30-second soundbite.
Yeah. Okay, Coinvise. Are we doing Coinvise?
Yeah, Coinvise is an interesting situation. Let's assume they have to rebrand. They're in a certain situation. We don't have to go into the details of that, but they do. Let's just take for granted they have to rebrand, and they're just wondering what's the best way to go about doing that.
About rebranding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, it could be. Is it as simple as change your logo, change your domain, and business as usual? Are there things that you should be careful not to do?
Right. Yeah. I obviously think it's so easy to give an answer of just, stand yourself upright, son, and just move on. And this should take 5 seconds. It's interesting to think about where rebranding went wrong. It's not that common. It's like pretty hard to screw this up. You can, dig V3, but that was a product failure. It wasn't a brand failure. Every time, it's worth noting, by the way, Coinvise people should know, every time the big companies roll out a new app icon, a new brand, everyone thinks it's just like the worst thing ever. That's because the human mind really likes familiarity. The great thing for Coinvise, as opposed to, Uber or Amazon, is they get to build familiarity with their new brand. So it won't actually be that painful. Meaning if Coinvise is successful, 0.01% of future Coinvise users are aware of it right now. So I would just move on pretty quickly and change this. I don't think it's that hard. You don't really have a jewel that you have this kind of thing at the bottom. I don't know what it is. Seems pretty generic. But look, and it seems like your entity name is different anyway. So I would just pick something and run for it. Rishi, how do you think this could go wrong? Like, where would that advice go wrong?
I think it's really, at this early, I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to do something wrong. So at this point, it's not like you're not in the public eye. That's the thing you're trying to solve.
Yes. That's the problem you're trying to create, in fact.
Yeah. So I would probably not overthink it, do it. And if you end up running into some problem, like people hate it, then great. You have users who love you then and who are upset. I think the odds of that happening at this stage are quite low.
I think that's right. It's worth noting one final thought. As per our earlier point, any new name you come up with will feel weird to you at the beginning. I think it'll be like riding a bike for the first time, and you'll crash in your head until you get used to it. It's worth noting, like, the biggest brands in the world, both in commodity and digital world, have really weird names. Like Coca-Cola is a really weird name when you think about it in the abstract. Like it's a kind of a mock name of an illicit drug. Airbnb is a really weird name. They actually hated it for a really long time. They couldn't come up with alternatives. And I think it was Steve Jobs that was driving down El Camino with Woz in the car one day, and they were endlessly bickering about names. And he, at some point, just said, "We're going to call it Apple unless you come up with something better in the next 24 hours." So I wouldn't overthink this, even though everyone does. Platter. Postgres at the speed of code, capital C code. I don't know that code should be capitalized. Branching serverless Postgres databases for your code base. Okay. I think this is a versioning thing. Oh, not? Okay. I thought it just handled like Git branching a bit nice here for my
I think it's
database.
basically if you're not on Heroku and you don't have one-click set of Postgres, this is one-click set of Postgres or
Right.
one enter.
Yes. And I guess what tripped me up where I didn't quite get there is this focus on code base. Me, just as an anecdotal, probably stupid user, like when you say that and you show this stuff, it seems like it's all about my local end that you're helping. If this is just hosted Heroku, I wonder if you say it's hosted Heroku. It's food for thought. Hosted Heroku from your terminal or something like that. What, do we have any fun questions here?
Yeah. Patrick's question is, it seems like selling to developers is becoming kind of a unique enough category on its own that's sort of separate from B2B or B2C. And so his first question is kind of general. Can you think of ways that you've observed in which developer tools products seem to go down a different growth channels or just go through marketing and sales very differently than other products?
Yeah, it's interesting to ask. I love the concept of it being a new practice with it's a new discipline that needs new education. And right now it's kind of being mimetically discovered. People are copying what Twilio and Stripe do. I guess my question is, do we have an idea that's better than just dominate Hacker News? Because that's the obvious one. Other than that, as you think about answers on your end, the one other thing I can think of is, it's not really that much smarter, but it's worth completely emulating the style, the kind of je ne sais quoi of the great developer companies, which means a lot of small things. Like, for example, the site actually looking really cool, the documentation page looking pretty pleasant. All these small things kind of add up. It's kind of like when you sit down for a very fancy dinner and I don't know, they have nice silverware. So what do you think, Rishi? Are there non-Hacker News strategies that are happening with developer tool companies?
I have an answer to a slightly different question than that one, which is I think because there are so many developer, like now versus 10 years ago, I feel like every time I Google for the right developer tool for something, there are about a billion options. And
Yeah.
I think the problem that you had, which is arriving here, and perhaps even more importantly than in other spaces, because engineers are quite impatient, the fact that you arrived here and didn't instantly kind of know what you're looking at is quite important. Like I spend probably at most 6 seconds on a README of a GitHub open source repository before I decide, I'm not going to use this because it's just too complicated to get set up or something or the other. So especially if what you're selling here is ease of use.
Yeah. It's interesting to put yourself in the hands of, like, the nice thing about a developer doing B2D is that we've all kind of been there. The scenario where you are the impatient customer, you arrived at the site, you're trying to figure out how this works, you're trying to figure out how to use this, and I mean, your brain is literally chewing at how can I get what I want done in 20 seconds or less. So since we've all been there, and presumably Patrick's been there too, you just try to emulate that. And by the way, I think it's that thinking that led, to the, famous whatever Stripe is. You can curl the thing. The command is on the homepage. It's just like that's the modality that you're in. You arrived at the repo and you just want to get it going. So I would just put yourself in that mindset. Basically, go try and use the next developer tool you see on Hacker News and learn all the good things and learn times -1 all the bad things.
All right, Patrick, I know you had a bunch of other questions, but sadly we have to move on. So hopefully that helps. Next up, we have Afriktrip.
By the way, as we pull up Afriktrip, I mean, the other question is what excites, investors about dev tools. The nice thing is, I don't think investors are thinking correctly about dev tools now. I think ever since the GitHub acquisition by Microsoft, everyone assumes dev tools are giant. And I think it's a very frothy market, overvalued in many ways, but it's probably awesome if you're in it because I think you can get funding. There's a broader question about just like how big can these developer tool companies get. But anyway, moving on to Afriktrip. A trip advisor for Africa. This is an interesting homepage, by the way, small aside, I'm realizing, at least for me. I understand what this does partially because of the UI, not because of the words. There's like
Google.
Exactly. This is your classic TripAdvisor UI. And you see it on Airbnb and you see it on TripAdvisor and the date picker. And there's usually one more option other than the destination. Anyway, it's an interesting point, I thought. So what are we doing? We could stare at nice photos.
Yeah, so the founder's asking, he is actually got a ton of supply. You can see here just browsing, there's tons of options. I think he has over 1,000 listings on the site in general. And he is not sure when is the right time to stop focusing on getting more listings and to get it out there and get people using it.
Yeah. It's such an interesting question because the answer is obvious from the question. Right. And so maybe digging in a bit more, the interesting question is kind of why haven't you gone out and tried to get people? And how can you change why you haven't? And there's a very easy answer, which is there has been a global pandemic that's decimated the entire travel industry on planet Earth. So that could be one.
One thing I'll add, by the way, from his question is, and he says, should we keep adding new supply and try to raise money to get more hands to help? So let's assume the team is very small. Possibly, I think it's actually 2 of them, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So obviously a small team. So should they don't have the bandwidth to do too much.
Yep. I mean, here's the so obviously, of course, the answer, I think, feel free to disagree, is like stop building supply and start growing demand. Obviously, now the question is how, and whatever, people get vaccinated. People are already planning, I think, to travel this holiday season, say. So I wonder, one thing that could be interesting is if someone's truly coming to do in-depth analysis and research on Africa travel, they're not going to use this site because they don't know it. They're going to use TripAdvisor or they're going to use Airbnb experiences, if that's a thing. I wonder if instead you could just assume that there are some users that vaguely want to go to Africa and they vaguely have like some dates they want to go. They're pretty flexible on the month. One approach would be to really tailor, to be a country agnostic and to try to just be the best way to find activities across the entire continent. And then you build a whole trip around one particular activity. The other approach would be the exact inversion of this. So you go hyper specific and you build a ton of landing pages for, Botswana trips. The nice thing about the travel category on Google is if you do want to go through the deluge of trying to dominate it, there's a lot of queries that you could own. So you could become like the #1 landing site for a particular country, I imagine, for Africa.
It does make you wonder, given the state of travel, is the right approach, say if you were to focus on a small set of countries, is the right approach, let's focus on the popular countries because those are the likely destinations for people. Like no one is maybe you could make the case that people aren't gonna go to, I don't know, one of the lesser traveled countries in Africa, one of the lesser touristed countries in Africa, like, I don't know, Botswana. then maybe you should just focus on South Africa, Egypt. On the other hand, you could say people are, I don't know, you got to make the case both ways, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's probably important to figure out what that is. Like, to the extent that there is an appetite to go on to travel adventurously in the near future, where do people want to go?
Yeah. There's an adjacent question I was kind of wondering, which is, could you just somehow get people excited about booking things in 2022? You'd have a bit of an issue because you'd take cash booking from those people and you'd be subject to a potential cancellation fee. So I don't know what you could do with that cash, because I mean, it would be risky to do anything, particularly spendy with it, but it could be an interesting way to at least build revenue, is to try to get people to start booking things into the future. Usually when the reason travel sites don't do this, or the reason they discount aggressively into the future, is just conversion rates go up the further and further you pull out into the future. People don't like making plans. Most people don't like making plans that far out. But I don't know if maybe it's different now. One final thought is, I don't know if there'll be some weird arbitrage. I do think, like, after all this COVID stuff is done, it wouldn't surprise me if there's some type of, vaccination passport situation. And so I don't think travel will be simple, which is actually great news for founders working in this market, because the complexity will require someone to simplify it. So this website may turn into, like, tell me where your origin country is, tell me what vaccine you got, and I'll tell you where you can go. I don't know if, I would say 60% odds that happens, but it could be interesting.
The last possible idea that I would maybe consider is, if you do end up finding a specific niche that is working really well, the top UI is great because I know what it is, but maybe right below that, just sell me on one very specific thing and get me excited about it. And it doesn't have to be that people convert to that, but at least it gives me a little sense of what an experience might be like.
Yeah. By the way, just to layer on top of that, the other interesting question is, who is doing free marketing for you for, say, a particular experience? Meaning, I haven't watched all of these, like, Netflix, BBC Beautiful World shows about the stuff in the wild, but those are building kind of memes and availability cascades, and people, Narcos increased tourism to Colombia significantly. So is there an equivalent of that? Is there, like, a particular experience that's kind of popular on the internet that you could build the go see it in the real world for, as seen on TV style? Anyway, good stuff. Next, we have Sendchamp, which is a kind of multimodal messaging thing with a focus on Africa. And it has the Airtable people. Or the Notion people. I don't know. They both have them. By people, I mean these little people drawings.
We have this and two more projects. We're going to speed round through these last three.
Okay.
His question is, the sales, is their approach for sales, should they focus on selling to developers or business owners?
I guess the question is, are they building Twilio or, like, CallRail? And it seems to me like the answer would be, in an emerging market like Africa, probably directly to business owners. Meaning, I don't know if there's a lucrative kind of algae, of developers that are kind of in this market, and they're really excited to build on top of Sendchamp already, and they're going to talk to business owners for you. If that's the case, awesome. But it wouldn't surprise me if you kind of just need to vertically integrate, just given how much of a frontier market Africa is and how early things are there, and find business owners directly yourself and build a. I could be totally wrong here. I'm still learning about the Lagos market, but it wouldn't surprise me if you need to go directly to business owners yourself, and then over time maybe you provide your platform to other developers. One strategy to square the distance could be to just focus on just find 5-10 businesses and focus the whole company on that, and then once you onboard them, everything will follow from there.
Yeah, in his message, he says we have about 7 businesses that are using it now. I would just ask them, or get to know them based on talking to them. Try to understand, because what you probably shouldn't do is look at like a SendGrid or Twilio's homepage and figure out how to market it, because the dynamics internally at these companies is going to be very different.
Yes, I think that's totally true.
Okay, we should move on.
Cool.
Next up, we have fcomplexity.com. And there are credentials in there for us to demo as well, actually. I will say, when I first landed on this, I felt obligated to complete the puzzle.
I see.
I
Creds.
don't know what I'm calling it a puzzle. It's just code.
What? Screw time and space complexity, become a better software engineer by solving real world engineering problems. Cool. Developers, researchers, no clicky. Great. This is very funny. Okay. I mean, that's neat. That's neat. Look, I'm doing what everyone else would do. Oh, fuck. Is this Python 3? Okay. I'm not going to waste everyone's time here, but anyway,
temptation to break this.
It's funny how we had a little bit of opposite temptations there. What's the question here?
Let's see. Faison just wants landing page feedback, and particularly, he's trying to figure out how much he should be communicating to users. Should he email users every time he adds a new problem set every week? I think we can just reframe the question to how best to make use, how best to find and make use of his best users.
Well, what does he want to do? Does he want to place these people at jobs?
Unclear.
A couple of interesting ways you can make money, potentially, if you would like to make this a business. By the way, on homepage design, I thought your second line was much better than your first, so I just swapped them. You could put some other text here. Later on, we could figure that out. It's even better. I think there's 2 ways you could make, potentially you can make, I mean, there's many. One is 3, actually. I think, and Rishi, you can complete anything I'm missing. One is you can obviously focus on just educating people that are not software engineers, and this could become a new college, and you can charge people tuition, and this is Lambda school with no teachers. That's a bit grand and a bit tricky. And I think, well, anyway, that's a whole set of that's a long rabbit hole. Second is you could use this to place people at companies. That's pretty obvious. Third is you could use this as a form of upskilling within an existing company, which I think would be pretty interesting and pretty lucrative if you could break into a company, and notably if you could have some sense that developers are actually improving. The mind. yeah, wants to go deep down that rabbit hole, quantifying developer productivity and improving it. And don't get me wrong, the F complexity people want to do that. They should urgently reach out to everyone they know. Well, most importantly us, because I think we'd be very excited about that. I don't think you need to do that though. Like I think you just get developers to rave about it in the company. But boy, if you could quantify developer at position at is score 55, and after a week with the software he's at 62, victory condition, go home.
The other thing, this is perhaps not the direction for F complexity to go, but one thing that I think would be phenomenal for a lot of junior engineers is the way you can do like puzzles for chess. I think you can basically do that for like PRs on GitHub. In other words, show me a snippet of code. What is the one change you can make to make this better? Because I think you could basically, I think it gets harder and harder over time. Like it gets harder and harder over time, but there are little changes you can make to make code a lot better and more readable. So it's not necessarily a solve a difficult problem. It's how can I make this code more human friendly, not machine friendly?
Yes.
But I would love that.
I wonder, yeah, I think that would be incredible. I'm just thinking about the thing chess has is the ELO score, which goes back to our earlier point about quantifying software engineering. But yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, this could be like a daily crossword. That in itself could make money as a nice subscription. Maybe that's the simple thing to do.
Yeah, I did like two puzzles on chess.com, and then I subscribed and I paid for it.
Totally. This seems similar.
This is our last one, and Leander would just like some landing page feedback.
Hack the learning curve. I don't even know what I'm looking at. I mean, this looks like an astronaut's helmet. Stardust gives knowledge workers the tools to succeed in the 21st century. Become a polymath. Discover knowledge. Build a knowledge map. Make progress. So is this kind of some type of mind mappy thing that quizzes you about it? Is that the idea?
I am not. I'm trying to figure it out.
I think it is a mind mappy thing. I mean, I think it's trying to figure out what it is, but
if you go to the blog, there is a giant screenshot that I think on the first post. Yeah, it seems like what you're saying.
Yeah, it seems like some type of graph mind map thing. I don't know if this is from his or he generated this or took it from another generated thing. But basically, I mean, my feedback, I should say, and I'll ask you is, it's not clear what it is. So it would be great to clarify it. I mean, I think there's all of these things sound really exciting, but I feel like it's a lot of garnish with no main dish. What do you think, Rishi?
Yeah, I feel like there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs on a landing page.
Yes.
And while there's always, I guess if people are, the ones at the top kind of seem the most fun and interesting, not different from the actual Maslow's hierarchy, but you do kind of need to tell people what you're building. Step one.
Yeah, I think that's right. This is very much about fulfillment, achievement, whatever those top Maslow's are.
Could be wrong. It could be the case that someone sees become a polymath. There's a certain type of user, perhaps the user of this that sees that and is like, yeah, I do. I wouldn't, but I might just not be the user.
That's true. I mean, we always talk about this on landing pages, you know, and if you go to Nike, Better Together. What is that? Is it a Better Together company? Is it Jack Johnson? No one knows. But Nike's so established, they can go for the full-on aspirational thing. But yeah, maybe that works. All right, good stuff. When are we going back on the radio? When are we doing this again?
It should be
momentarily.
Likely 4 weeks, potentially 2 weeks. We shall see. We added a month this time, and we got a bunch of interesting projects, so we'll see.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. Hopefully this was useful for everyone. Send us feedback on the format and send us more questions.